Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Super-Fanta-Fi. This being a show where we talk about TV shows of the supernatural, fantasy, and or science fictional genre. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about Nancy Drew, Season 4, Episode 8. A lot of really interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. It's a really interesting timing for this very, Freaky Friday inspired thing to go down this episode, considering everything they got going on, looking for the black door because it wasn't at City Hall like they thought it was. Nancy broke in and to no avail, but also it's the 1 year anniversary of Kate's death, and Carson's like, oh, invite your friends over, but Nancy's kind of almost going back to who she was in the beginning of the series, where it's like, no, let's just kind of make it a you and me thing. Because obviously, like, at the beginning of the series, Nancy had just lost her mom, and so she was just which also is interesting, like, so it does definitively tell the story that, like, right, so, because I said, in between seasons, there were some time skips, but never massive amounts. Like, the one I keep going back to is season 2 to 3. It's like maybe couple weeks, if not even just a week. But yeah, it shows that this entire series is taking place over the course of a year, which is really interesting. Now, not a little more, probably a little more of a year, because obviously Nancy's mom was already gone by the time the beginning of the series happened. So, probably, truth be told, it's probably even less than a year now at this point in time. But either way, you get the point I'm making. But, Nancy was the type who always wanted to handle stuff alone. She even kind of handled her grief alone, which obviously wasn't the most healthy way of handling things. But I mean, everyone handles their grief in a certain way. But I thought was interesting where Ryan was talking to Carson, where it's like, right, your grief is important too, dude. But for Carson, it's like, right, he kind of doesn't deal with his own grief as much because he wants to focus on Nancy's grief, because obviously she's the one that, he wants Kate back just as much as she does, but he knows how hard it is for Nancy, and it's like, as a parent, I kind of might have to make sacrifices about my own grief to make sure she's okay, so because he saw what, and not saying, I don't want to make it seem like he handled that grief better, but it's just like he knows how much of a toll it took on her and how isolated she became because of it. And so she's almost kind of doing that. So this Freaky Friday situation kind of came at the perfect time for a lot of people, because she didn't tell anyone. Ace is the only one who knew what this day meant to her. Without anyone saying anything, he knew, enough about her to know, right, it's your mom died a year ago. But either way, Ryan brought an artifact that was supposed to help, but it ended up causing a body switch kind of at an inopportune time for a lot of people. Nick has to do a speech, for his seat on the council, but Bess is in his body. George is in Bess's body, where Bess has to help these two brothers because one brother has this family curse, which almost, it reminds me of Haven, the TV show, that's kind of loosely based on Stephen King's The Colorado Kid. I feel like I referenced it recently in something else. I don't remember what. Might have been when I was recently talking about Gotham Knights, because Emily Rose was in it. I feel like there was something else more recent I talked about Haven in that regard, but tangents and all that aside. The fact is that George is in Bess's body while she has to help these people. The point I was making is they have something similar to the characters from the show Haven, where they had these supernatural abilities called troubles, these supernatural afflictions. And so in the case of one of the brothers, he hears dead people, which I did love George being the one who handles that, because she was initially trying to not handle it, but she was like, no, she was like, oh, I was reminded I had a heart, because she wanted to help, because she, her family, Anita's got these brothers, their family looks at his ability as a blessing, but it will eventually drive him insane to the point he can't hear any other voices but theirs. It'll drown out his own voice, his own thoughts, which George understands that more so than anything. She knows what that type of affliction can do to a person, what it can do to a family, because what it did to her family, what it did to her mom. Her mom, basically drowns herself in alcohol. She can't be she's not the most stable human being, because of that. And so, and what that kind of meant for George and her sisters. So, that's what motivated her to kind of tackle this. And George is it, and Bess is in. Did I already say that? Jesus, Bess is in Nick's body, and Nick is in George's body. I think I already said that. I'm so sorry. I'm confusing myself with the Freaky Friday situation. If I already said that, I'm sorry. Like, I'm probably reiterating. I kind of could confuse myself. That's a problem doing all this off the top of my head. I'm forgetting what I just said. Sorry. But yeah, I love that Nick. I mean, and I think that speaks volumes about where they are in their relationship. It is a super bummer that it's like, right, I was hopeful that they would get back together. I mean, you never know what the future holds later on down the road. They could still manage to get back together, but it seems like not for now. They're going down their own paths. I mean, things are good between Jade and Nick, especially after last episode. It's like, I mean, they gave him the nickname Grimslayer. But yeah, Nick is in George's body on her study date with this dude, Cameron. And it's like, oh, this guy knows a lot about you, knows what you like in your coffee. It's like, yeah, I remember everything that you tell me. And it's like, I do love Nick being kind of, he's like, it even says later on, I'm glad I was able to be your body swapped wingman. It's like, yo, Nick, yo. That's so interesting when you kind of have your ex be your wingman. I've had that happen once in my life. It's a weird situation. It's a funny story, but I always look back on it finally and be like, oh, that happened in my life where an ex-girlfriend kind of nudged me towards a future girlfriend who's now an ex-girlfriend, but you know, still, it's one of those funny stories in life. And I was just like, oh, just, once again, it just kind of connected in that regard. But it's like, yeah, look at Nick being a wingman. It's like, right. Because it's kind of like on the opposite end of like where Nancy and Ace are. Their situation is so complicated. Like, right, we want each other to be happy, but it's such a complicated thing. But like Nick and George are like happy for each other. It's like George is happy for Nick, and Nick is like, yo, kind of laying things up for George. And it's like, hey, I think this Cameron dude really likes you. So it's like, yeah, I'm going to set up the next like study date or whatever. So that was actually really neat. And with Bess in Nick's body, all she had to do was like read the notes he had for his speech. But then he also gets confronted by the person who's like she's not the head of it, but she's the spokesperson for the group that's coming after the Historical Society. And Bess, as Nick, kind of had to like temper her like issues. And I do love that her accent's coming out a little bit, which is funny because I forgot where he's from, but the actor who plays Nick, like obviously his like Nick, the accent he does as Nick is his American accent. It's not his natural accent. Just kind of like Bess was putting on an American accent, and now like the actress is using her natural accent. So I don't know if that is maybe her natural accent. I never looked into it because she could be putting on it like a more, because she has a very posh accent. That might not be her natural accent. I'm just like, I think I've heard, it might be, because I've heard the cast talk before. So I think that is just her natural accent. I don't think she's poshing it up. She might be a little bit, but I don't know. But I was like, yeah. Like I said, I forgot where the actor who plays Nick is from. But it's like, yeah, like he's kind of, his accent is almost like that. So it's almost like he's having to kind of mimic Bess while also kind of almost doing his own natural accent. It's kind of, once again, accent stuff is funny and when you layer it like that stuff. But yeah. And so, but obviously, like I said, everyone else kind of like had each other's back this episode. Nancy and Ace kind of had a bumpy road because, well, Ace in Nancy's body had to be the one to talk to his dad because Nancy was trying to learn sign language. Makes sense because it's like, hey, everything between you and Ace, you probably were like, yeah, I'll probably end up spending more time around your family. So I want to be able to talk with your dad, but she's not fluent in sign language. She's just been watching videos and stuff, but you know, it's still not good. Which I also think that's kind of, I mean, for one, that's sweet. Because, I mean, I think that's sweet in any relationship where it's like, oh, you talk like someone, like, oh, you're dating someone whose family member speaks a different language and you learn that language for that purposes. So I think that's kind of really sweet and that's really, really neat. They just kind of weren't gelling this episode, Ace and Nancy, because, like, Ace was supposed to go in as Nancy, to that particular place where like, hey, we find out, because this all connected to a case that Ace's dad worked on years ago. And it turns out that building, only like certain people can get into it because it's a yacht club now, but it wasn't always a yacht club. It also served as a little bit of a city hall back in the day. So that's the city hall home dude from last episode was referencing. So, Nancy was the only one allowed in because she's a Hudson and she could only have herself in. But Nancy as Ace ended up coming along too because it's like, right, I figured you would have backup. It's like you couldn't trust him enough to kind of handle it on his own. So they both got booted. So granted, you probably wouldn't have been able to kind of like look around and do what you wanted to do like out in public. They had to wait till nighttime anyway. But their flow was off because it's like, right, we're supposed to be giving each other space. Because that was my wonder after last episode between the conversation between them, where it's like, right, we're supposed to be giving each other space. Because even she was like, I wasn't expecting you to show up. He's like, right, you need help, so I'm here to help. So trying to be as platonic and not weird about it as possible. But ultimately, they do talk about it. And it is this really sweet thing of, well, at the end of the day, we are a better team than we are apart. We are both better with each other because we were so caught up in the bad that we were so focused on like thinking we were bad for each other when in actuality we're really good for each other, having each other in our lives. It makes both of our lives better. And I think that's such an interesting lesson for like especially Nancy to learn too, especially because at a time where she was kind of pushing everyone away, because it wasn't until she talked to Carson when she was in Ace's body where he ordered a meal that was Kate's, and also referencing like the cake fights that they would have on special occasions. And for Carson, he's like, yeah, I worry about Nancy. Sometimes I think she focuses on the negative, the bad memories rather than the good. Which I get that. Like when something tragic like that happens, that's all you can think about, you know, and she even says it later on that it's like the focusing on the bad memories was a lot easier than happy memories, because the happy memories would just make you miss her more. And so it cuts deeper. So it's a little easier to focus on the bad memories because it doesn't make her miss her mom any less, but remembering the happy memories would kind of like, like she'd kind of choke on that sadness a little, and I thought that was, so for her to kind of pull away from that with like the end result of the episode is her inviting everyone over. And she gave this beautiful line afterwards, like where it's when she was talking to everyone, it's like, a year ago my mom died and like she couldn't handle it. And she handled so much on her own. That's the Nancy we got at the beginning of the series. But for her, it's like, I ended up going off and making this makeshift family I have right now with you guys to a family of sorts. And it's like, I'm scared, like, if anything ever, like, happened to either one of you, I don't think I'd be able to handle it, because I can't lose another family member. And they're like, no matter what happens, we'll always be here for you, because we are a family. And they hug. I'm like, that's so beautiful. I love that. Like, and she was able to kind of bring both her, like, all her families together, because at the end, it's her, it's the Drew crew, with the exception of Ace, because he's off making memories with his dad, because, yeah, it's like, yeah, like, things can be messy, but for Nancy, it's like you had those opportunities to make those memories. Whether they're messy or not, they're still good memories, and you get to make more of them. So take this opportunity, because, as someone on the other side of that situation, no longer having a mom around, not being able to make more new memories, she knows what that means. And Ace can understand, like, right, not to take those things for granted, seeing from Nancy's perspective, But yeah, it wasn't just them, for Carson, he was able to kind of see Nancy handling everything. And I think, also having Ryan there who wants to be there for both him and Nancy. Because at the end of the day, it's like, right, if I'm dad number two, it's like dad number two or not, you are family too. So Carson appreciates having you there and Nancy appreciates having you there. So I thought that was really beautiful. And like I said, I love how everyone was there for each other in this episode. It was really just kind of like very beautiful episode to have this season, and just kind of like it feels so good. It's just, especially timing wise, I haven't seen this week's episode of Riverdale, but last week's episode, how it ended is how it reminded me in this episode, where like the entire cast like hugged each other, because I looked it up, it was the final musical episode of Riverdale, so it was very like cathartic and beautiful. Everyone like hugging Kevin in that moment. It felt similar, and it's just like, it's beautiful for them all to kind of be together like that. And like I said, Ace had to be with his dad, especially because Bess, while she was still in Nick's body, ended up performing the ritual, and they made a makeshift ritual where they ended up having to trap the curse inside of a pickle jar or whatever, and then Ace, while he's on the boat with his dad, ended up having to like throw it in the ocean. I don't know if that wave was. It seemed too coincidental that the wave that hit them, because I guess like maybe that was just the energy from the curse being dispersed. Because the moment it hit the water, it lit up. Where I'm like, I don't know what that's supposed to signify or not. I don't know what to fully make of that. Whether that's supposed to be a thing of maybe that's not as done with as we think it is, or maybe it's just maybe that's just gonna be like we'll never get this story, but that's a future problem that this continuity would have to deal with eventually. I don't know if that's what they're going for there. Just that it happens to glow and sink into the ocean, then also like the wave of water hits them. So I don't know if that was kind of like the curse trying to break out, but it's stuck. I don't know if that was indicative of any. Like I said, I don't know if anything's going to come of that in the last couple episodes or not. But going back to like, once again, everything being kind of the beautiful and cathartic is because for Nancy, it's like, right, being surrounded by people that she loves. She's like, right, this is what my mom would want. And it's just like, if my mom was here right now, she'd be so happy to have everyone here. And she'd also start by telling an embarrassing story just so she could have my dad blush. And obviously it's very hard, but I think having everyone there meant a lot to her, and they have their little cake fight at the end. And I was like, that's, once again, it's just cathartic and beautiful, and you're just like, yes. But also, it led to some catharsis between Nancy and Ace too. So they're in a much better place because they said like, hey, we're better off with each other in our lives. Like, we do make a really good team, and we were just both kind of focusing on like, right, thinking and worrying that we bring out the worst in each other, when in fact we make each other better. So we'll see what that means going forward. So I do believe there's going to be an Ace and Nancy by the end of this. Maybe if they're able to kind of work that out, maybe not. Maybe this is just going to be, as Nancy kind of put it, she's like, she wanted this day to be normal, but she's like, there is no normal because life isn't normal, especially their lives aren't normal. And she's like, my mom wasn't normal. My mom was her own kind of weird in her own capacity. So I thought that was kind of beautiful. But at the end of the day, the Drew crew ended up finding out about the door. Nancy found it, and it is because she had noticed like the way the place, like, the location of where the door should have been. It turns out there was a secret staircase. Go down it. They found like not the mast of the boat, the front ornament of the boat. I don't think that's called a mast. I don't know boat stuff. But it's some kind of creature on it, and then she ultimately finds the door. It's like a mirror with a phrase on it. I was worried because, like, if you say the phrase, I was like, does that mean that? I mean, it activated and turned her to an actual door, and the creature started screaming. Because looking around, she found out that, like, right, something supernatural happened here. And she was like, right, maybe this is where the monster was born. Well, it turns out that like, thing screaming is supposed to call the monster. So it's probably a good thing she left when she did, because it probably would have summoned the monster there. But the point is, you go through the door, you say what sin it is you're trying to erase, you come out, and this monster eats it because it's a literal sin eater. So, and I even love George pointing out, it's like, yeah, it makes sense that the weirdos that came here, the founders and weirdos that came here who killed Odette, would also have like made like an ornament to like your ship be like something creepy like that. Yeah, they were creepy weirdos. So, but now they know what it is they're up against. They have a better understanding of this. So it's like, right, should we guard that door? But it's like, no, that door most likely has its own guards because it's probably been protected for centuries. But once again, why is it coming up now? This thing has been, well, it seems like it was summoned fairly recently, but maybe this thing kind of comes and goes in existence. So maybe every once in a while it's summoned every so often, but maybe because it doesn't seem like it's actively out and about. It seems like it has to actively be summoned. So when they ran into the woods, that means someone had summoned it recently. But she also said like maybe that wasn't even just it being summoned. That might have just been like it being made. So it was made recently. So maybe after it serves its purposes after a while, maybe it just automatically goes away. Maybe it's weird. I was going to reference another movie, but I'm like, I don't think I shouldn't reference the movie because the director behind that's kind of a piece of shit. There's a certain movie that creature happens every so often. Again, Jeepers Creepers, because I think the director of the first two movies is a piece of shit, if I'm not mistaken. I could be speaking out of pocket, but regardless, like how that works, like every 23 springs for 23 days it gets to eat type of thing. So this thing kind of does that too, especially because it's supposed to be every 27. I didn't even put that together. It's like every 27 years for this thing. It does feel like, it feels like they are really pulling a lot from other things, kind of like references and homages to stuff, especially like this season. I don't remember if I kept it in the last review, but I was talking a little bit about how like it seems like they're paying homage to a lot of stuff. Like this was the Freaky Friday episode. Last episode was kind of like your. I didn't think about it at the time, but it definitely was probably like your very like classic Evil Dead kind of action-y comedy horror type of thing vibe that they were kind of going for. I mean, it was like cheesy like 80s movie, but more so like 80s action. But I'm sure like you add in like, you know, a little like supernatural horror, then you kind of get the Evil Dead, probably specifically. I've never seen the OG like Evil Dead movies all the way through. I've seen bits and pieces of them, but probably more so like Army of Darkness type of feel and vibe. But either way. Also, we found out that the person who tricked Ryan with the supernatural thing he got was the glasses. They were doing that just to make a point because Ryan poached one of their clients. I don't know if that was probably the ally he got. She's probably also the person he was texting with to help, like, because they are going up against the glasses. It's like, but, you know, Nancy was like, yeah, don't declare war with the glasses. He's like, yeah, kind of already too late, kind of already did that. So I'm sure that's going to, once again, I'm surprised that's not more of this season. Once again, maybe they have something to do with this. I have no idea, but you would assume that they would have been a bigger part of this season, especially with Tristan's introduction and stuff. So maybe some of those storylines were kept the same, but then they had to be retooled a little bit because this was going to be the final season. So maybe they kept a lot of that where it was, but then kind of retooled a lot of the ending of the season to kind of give it a proper. I don't know. So I don't know if the glasses are going to have like some like, hey, they've always been behind the scenes involved in all of this stuff, or are they just going to have a more bigger role in the later parts of the last few episodes? I don't know. We'll see as that kind of heats up between Ryan and the glasses. I didn't cover this, but I forgot Nick also stepped away from his seat because the lady that's the spokesperson for the group against the Historical Society, it's like, oh, I just wanted to like make sure you're on the right side of things. But he's like, no, I turned down that position because I'm not going to I do it because I can fight people like you. Because if I'm on the council seat, like I'm not going to be in a position to really take you on. And she's like, oh, that's a big mistake. He's like, that wouldn't be my first one. I thought that's because they're going to get someone they believe is going to be on their side in the council. Like either she's going to step up and replace Nick or someone that's more so on their side is. So that's probably going to complicate things. But Nick and Bess, along with George, are going to kind of make a more new home for the Historical Society because they can't use what was originally the Historical Society now, and Bess is prevented from going there and doing anything supernatural, talking about anything supernatural. So once again, why they're so adamant against the supernatural, it just seems like, because she was like, oh yeah, like this kid got brainwashed. It's like, yeah, but so much has happened, both positively and negatively because of the supernatural, and a lot of the positive stuff has been the Drew crew stopping the terrible like you have no idea how many crises have been averted in Horseshoe Bay on the supernatural front, but they use that against it. It's like, oh, if it wasn't for the supernatural, but it's like the supernatural is inundated with this town. This town has connection to the supernatural dates so far back, you can't get rid of it. As I've talked about it before, this is a beacon for the supernatural. So it's always going to be here. You want everyone properly knowledgeable and properly equipped to face whatever supernatural challenges come their way. So it's going to be interesting to see how that plays out for that trio, because it's like, right, Nick and Bess are going to like handle that, and obviously George are going to need legal counsel. So she wants to help the fight, but I'm sure she could also serve as their legal counsel to kind of help them kind of scapegoat any illegal activities they are ultimately going to end up doing in this fight. But that's definitely going to be interesting to see how this plays out, how this whole situation with Sin Eater plays out. I'm very excited to ultimately see where all of this ends up taking us going forward into the next episode. But really, that's all I wanted to talk about. Till the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day, and good